All right, everyone. Welcome back to DSP versus the Internet, episode 83. We are still going through the Ultra member submissions. Let's continue and see what's next.
Did you know that Netflix does not offer traditional health insurance to their employees? Instead, Netflix offers a $15,000 yearly allowance. If you
Wow.
want, you can use this with one of Netflix's Kaiser or collective health plans, but you can also use the allowance with any provider you want. And if you end up spending less than $15,000 on health insurance, you can even get up to $5,000 back. And it's not just your health insurance benefit that you can get in cash either. You can actually get all of your benefits in the form of cash, even including your stock compensation. This approach has resulted in Netflix paying the highest cash salaries in the world, period. Basically, imagine Google tier compensation, but all in the form of cash. That's Netflix. Combine this with the fact that Netflix tries to provide each employee with 100th percentile salaries, and things get crazy real fast. Take software engineers, for example. The highest paid software engineer at Netflix who has submitted their salary to levels is a back-end engineer located in Chicago, earning $1.5 million per year.
Wow.
If you take a closer look, you'll see that the salary consists of $1.5 million in cash, 0 in stock, and 0 in bonus. Google does have similarly paid engineers as well. The highest paid engineer at Google comes in at $1.27 million per year. But if you take a closer look, you'll see that only $340,000 of that is in cash,
Only.
$794,000 is in the form of stock, and $139,000 is in the form of a bonus.
Wow.
And this is not just the case with software engineers either. Whether you're a technical program manager, a product manager, or even the CEO, your compensation can be taken entirely in the form of cash. Last year, Netflix's co-CEO Ted Sarandos, for example, received $20 million in cash.
So I wonder why more companies don't do it that way. Why do companies insist that you get their established health plan? Why do they say you must take this retirement fund this way? Is there a benefit to them? And is there a higher cost involved to provide the cash? I wonder. I mean, it's no concern to me. I'll never get any of this, but
This makes Netflix the highest cash payer in the world, period. There may be some exceptions here and there that make more than what Netflix offers, but as an organization, no one pays higher cash salaries than Netflix. This doesn't mean that you're forced to take cash though. If you want to take stock, you can let HR know, and they can convert your entire compensation to stock. The founder of Netflix, Reed Hastings, for example, chose to take his $40 million package mostly in stock. Most employees, however, generally choose fully cash compensations.
Yeah, I mean, because cash is something you can use now, as opposed to if you put it in stock, then you have to wait for the stock value to go to a level where you think like you made a good investment. Then you take the money out, then you have to pay taxes on the dividends and shit, and then you can finally, use the money or whatever. I get it, and plus stock's volatile. Stock is volatile at any moment. What happens if Netflix tanks for some reason? Now you lost all your money. Right?
So here's how Netflix ended up becoming the cash king, and the pros and cons of this practice. These crazy high cash salaries are no doubt unorthodox, but that's just one of the many practices at Netflix that are unorthodox. Reed Hastings has an extremely unique leadership style.
I don't want to hear about his leadership style.
So
I want to
that's
hear
why
what's
Netflix
good and bad
offers
about
their
this.
compensations in cash. But is there actually any real benefit to this? Well, absolutely. For one, employees don't have to deal with stock fluctuations.
What I just said.
Here's the thing. The stock compensation figures that you see on salary websites aren't constant figures. Let's take a Facebook director, for example. According to Levels, a Facebook director earns $881,000 per year in stock. However, this compensation figure only comes to fruition if the stock price stays constant throughout the job. In other words, Facebook will not provide you with more shares of stock just because the share price falls. Instead, a set number of shares are determined when you get hired. Usually, these stock plans are set up to last 4 years from the day you get hired. So, if you get hired as a Facebook director, you wouldn't be offered $881,000 per year. Rather, you'd be offered $3.5 million for the next 4 years at current share prices.
Right.
From there, you'll get access to a portion of the stock every year. This might not sound like a big difference,
What's up,
but
Ratio?
it
How you
definitely
doing?
can be. For example, imagine that you were hired at Facebook in September of
Well, this is all we were saying. So why this is why cash is king, because there's no fluctuation. So why would cash be bad? Let's hear about that. Why would cash be a bad way to pay?
While fully cash compensations have a lot of perks, like anything, they also come with a fair number of cons as well. For example, while cash salaries may seem nice during recessionary periods, during bull markets, it's the exact opposite. Let's go back to the Facebook director. Instead of assuming that you joined in 2021, what if we assume that you joined in 2017? Between 2017 and 2021, Facebook stock grew by over 100%. This means that if you joined Facebook in 2017, your stock compensation would have grown to over $1.7 million in 2021, despite the fact that you're doing the same job. This in turn would increase your total compensation from
That's a dumb reason. So you say, oh, if you just got insanely lucky and the stock did skyrocket, you would have gotten paid more. Yeah, but that's a risk. I would much rather have the cash because it's safe. I want the safe investment. I don't want to do the work and then get screwed and not get appropriate compensation because the valuation of the company went down because of some dicks on Wall Street. So, okay. Interesting, because I did not know that. And to have a cash option like that is very interesting. Let's go to the next video.
First released in arcades in early 2000, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 New Age of Heroes doesn't really need an introduction. We all know about the game's giant character roster, big combos, and killer soundtrack, so I won't go deep into the obvious stuff. With the upcoming release of the Marvel vs. Capcom collection for modern consoles and PC, I was overjoyed to see the original games making a grand return, especially games with very few ports like X-Men Children of the Atom and X-Men vs. Street Fighter.
Yep.
But this got me thinking about Marvel 2, because while this game has had many ports over the years, I've realized that I've never tried all of them out, so that's what we're here to do. Let's explore every single port of this game to see both the positives and the negatives of each version, and also to shine some light onto the forgotten versions of the game, like the iOS port for example. As a disclaimer, I do lack access to some of the consoles this game was ported to, so I'm mostly going to be relying on emulation to record footage, although I do own a copy of the original Xbox and Xbox 360 versions of the game, so I can play those on actual hardware, with the cost for new items being semi-randomized. After unlocking all of the characters on both...
Oh, I remember this. This is the Dreamcast version. And in the Dreamcast version, you had to basically unlock everything. Nothing was unlocked. It was just like the arcade, where in the arcade you had to play a certain amount of time, and then all the characters would unlock. Or you had to put in a certain amount of credits and the characters would unlock. On the Dreamcast version, you had to like have play hours, so you could just leave it on for like 3 days, and then you unlock everything. But it was crazy because you had to leave it on for 3 days. Like you had to have it for a week before you could get everybody. And that's what this is. It's the tracking of time and stuff.
Both the arcade and the Dreamcast version, you may notice that the character select screen itself has been altered for the home console version. Some characters are in completely different spots, and this always throws me for a loop when I go between the different games.
Oh,
Going back to the secret factor for a moment, the way I described it only applies to the Western versions of the game, but according to a quote from the Cutting Room Floor website, the method for unlocking characters and other content in this game was pretty straightforward. The more you play, the more points you earn, which can be used to buy things in the secret factor. This wasn't the case for the Japanese version, where you had 3 different sets of points. D points, which were earned in arcade mode as in other regions, V points, which were earned by plugging your VMU into a Marvel vs. Capcom 2 arcade machine and playing the game, and N points, which were earned by playing online matches. The 3-tier point system was streamlined into a single point system for the US version due to the online mode being removed from this version, and VMU support being removed from the US version of the arcade version. That's right, in Japan you could physically plug your VMU into the arcade cabinet and play online matches too. While online play was cut from the Dreamcast port's Western version, I still consider this to be part of the game, and it's obviously a huge...
Why? You might say, why was it cut? Because in Japan, they have different internet than in the rest of the world. In Japan, all of the internet is owned by the government. So the government owns the infrastructure, and therefore the internet quality in Japan is insanely good. As early as the time of Street Fighter 4, so 2009, you could play online play in Japan, and it was great. People were like, dude, it feels like you're playing someone sitting next to you, because their internet is absolutely top-notch. But for the rest of the world, the internet's far inferior. So if they had online play for this game and you tried to play it, it wouldn't work. So they had to remove it completely. So how cool was that in Japan they actually had online play for Marvel 2 at the beginning of the 2000s? That's insane to think. Fighting games were being played online in like 2000 in Japan. That's wild.
Huge difference between the two. To be perfectly honest with you, other than the things I've mentioned already, I don't notice any big changes in the Dreamcast port. The Dreamcast version and the arcade version are almost identical, and it just goes to show how good this home port is. It's still being played by top-level players to this very day, and for example, Romnito uploads multiple videos a day on his YouTube channel, and hell, people have figured out how to mod the game to have new music, stages, textures, etc. Overall, there's really nothing negative I have to say about this version of the game, and if you want to play it online, I highly recommend it via an emulator. I've had the pleasure of playing Marvel vs. Capcom 2 on a 4x3 monitor at my fighting game locals in the past, and even on the original hardware to this day, it feels fantastic. I do believe that the Dreamcast version has some little gameplay changes and some bug fixes, but it's still the competitive standard for a reason. It's still...
It's very close to the arcade version. There's like two differences, and they're minor, and they don't really change competitive play. So everyone always, as soon as the Dreamcast version came out, that became the tournament standard after arcades were phased out, and that was what was played for like a decade. So, okay, let's see what the next version is.
Post that lists a bunch of things wrong with the PS2 port, so I wanted to test them out.
PS2.
For reference, I'm playing this on the PCSX2 emulator in the PS2's native resolution, and I also haven't enabled any graphical or audio enhancements. We're not starting off strong here, because the game looks sort of blurry, and it just looks a lot less clear than the Dreamcast version. I thought that I needed to put on my glasses when I was playing it, but I soon realized that this is just how the game looks. The colors also look a little bit different too, and I think that it's due to how washed out the whole thing is on the PS2. Also, before I even got past the main menu, I noticed that the game's audio quality isn't amazing.
Yeah, the audio is terrible. They crushed the audio files. They must have fucking compressed the living shit out of them, so they sound atrociously bad.
Storm, for example, has had all of her sound effects really compressed, and some of her sound effects have even changed, and it just doesn't sound right. I'm unsure why the PS2 port has both compressed versions of the original sounds and brand new sounds mixed together, but maybe it was due to hardware limitations. In terms of gameplay, it feels mostly the same as the original Dreamcast release on a surface level. Basic B&B still work, and all the characters are here, which is good. Some of the glitches, like Gambit's way to leave the planet, have been removed, so it seems like Capcom went in and they did some fixing to the game's code. They didn't stop with bug fixes, however, as when you start looking into it, you realize that some pretty major aspects of the game balance have been changed too. Let's look at Cyclops, one of the most popular characters in the game. He's known for his godlike anti-air assist Gene Splice.
Yep.
This is a fantastic get-off-me tool with invincibility, but not in the PS2 port. This move can now be easily beaten out by a normal, a special, or even a super, so it's nowhere near as good as it was in the original.
Wow!
Speaking of nerfs, I've heard that alpha counters in general have all been nerfed to not be as safe as they are in the original, and this is also a pretty big change. Going back to assists, some characters with really good ones, like Tronbon for example, with her ring projectiles, have remained the same. This move still hits like a truck, and perhaps it's due to Capcom either forgetting or just not bothering to nerf it. Some of the more broken stuff from the original Dreamcast version was removed, and some of it was kept in, so the balance changes in the PS2 port just feel really inconsistent as a result.
And that's why you wouldn't want to play that. It's too inconsistent. If it was arcade, you know, okay. But why make different changes to it? It doesn't even make sense, right? Oh my god, look at this.
So I hooked up my original Xbox, I put in my totally legitimate copy of the game, and I fired it up. Even though I played the game on original hardware, I don't have a way of using my capture card with a system this old, so I couldn't record my own footage using a capture card. And secondly, emulating this game on Xbox is a real pain. If I use CXBX Reloaded, I have broken sprites that fail to render properly, and if I try to use CMU, I just get this error message. Believe me when I say that I spent the better part of a Monday night trying to fix this, but I just couldn't. The footage you'll see for this section will be a mix of my own guerrilla recordings and footage that I found on YouTube, so just pretend that you're back in the early 2000s when people would point camcorders at the TV. Firstly, I noticed that the audio quality of the game sounded about the same as it does in the PS2 version, and some of the sound effects are also different. Storm's standing light punch sounds like how it does in the PS2 port, not the Dreamcast version, so it leads me to believe that these two versions are very similar. Marvel vs. Capcom 2 in general uses the ADX format for its audio, but I think the compression is what's hurting it here. Another thing that I quickly noticed involves one of my favorite characters, Cable. In the Dreamcast and the arcade versions, his magic series has a tendency to drop if you don't time the super jump perfectly, and the enemy can quite often be too high up in the air to be hit by his jumping heavy kick, but not in the Xbox version. No matter what happens in this situation, the game will force Cable to be level with his opponent. This tells us that there are balance changes throughout this Xbox port, and as I unfortunately haven't unlocked every character, I can't test all 56 of them out. On the topic of gameplay though,
everyone knew this, like, when you could play the Dreamcast version, you're like, it pretty much feels like the arcade version. If maybe the speed is off slightly or whatever, you can tell it's pretty much accurate. I remember when the PS2 and Xbox versions came out and tournament organizers were debating, should we start using these? And we all had bought them and tried to try them. Like, dude, it doesn't even feel like the same game. It feels like they fucked up a lot of stuff. So, sadly, that would have been great because everyone had a PS2. Not as many people had original Xbox, but everyone had a PS2. And other games such as Street Fighter 3 Third Strike and CVS 2 were played on PS2. But for Marvel 2, we had to keep using Dreamcasts. But the problem with the Dreamcast is it gets old and breaks. And once it breaks, you got to send it off to get it repaired. You got to try to get a replacement. It was a nightmare trying to have Dreamcasts for over a decade to play Marvel 2 because there was no other viable way to play it. Everything else was just completely inaccurate to the original version.
Also cut off. No other game on my system does this, and I even found that IGN's review of the Xbox port mentioned the same thing, so maybe it's just a minor issue with the game itself. In terms of content, it's pretty much the exact same as the previous versions, meaning that it lacks online play.
Okay, what about this next version? Uh-oh. What happened?
Of 2009, Marvel vs. Capcom 2's HD re-release was slated for the Xbox 360 and the PS3, although I'm recording footage from the Xbox 360 version specifically. These two versions have some minor differences with their performance and the online play, but I'll be combining them both into this one section for time purposes. Before anything else, I'll say that this version has all the important stuff that you'd want: an updated menu system, widescreen support, achievements, character move lists, and online play. The latter is the biggest new addition, as it marks the first time that Marvel vs. Capcom 2 has been made playable online outside of Japan, and this port actually has rollback netcode, which is really cool.
It was terrible. It's not really cool, because it was 2009. It was so primitive. The game was pretty much unplayable online every time you tried to play it. It was just characters teleporting, skipping all over the place constantly. It didn't feel smooth at all. It was a joke. Like, I remember I was happy to have it on modern console, but it was unplayable online. Like, there was no reason to ever play it online. It was just atrociously bad.
The great thing is that having to unlock characters has been removed, so every character and color is ready to be selected right from the get-go.
That's good.
The game is also presented in a 16:9 resolution in HD, rather than the 4:3 resolution and standard definition of the original game. This new resolution makes the game look really crisp, and it's great seeing the original sprites animated this way. And speaking of animations, all of the animation frames are present and accounted for here, so every move looks and functions the way that it should. Some of the stages are affected by this visual upgrade, however, as due to the boost in aspect ratio, you can see that some of these stages have cutoff points that couldn't be seen in the original release. Hell, you can even see out of bounds sometimes.
Yep.
However, this has no impact on the gameplay, which is pretty good. If you don't like the way that the sprites look, you can play around with the game's newly included visual filters, although I just use the default setting. This is all great, but this port also has some issues, so let's get into them. I stumbled across an old thread on the Shoryuken forums, rest in peace, during my research with a list of some of the gameplay changes found in this version. A big one is that Cyclops' Infinite no longer works due to changes with the hit stun on some of his normals, and other characters are also affected by gameplay changes too. I'm not an expert at Marvel 2, far from it, but if this is truly the case, then it goes without saying that characters who rely on air lights for certain infinites, like Cyclops obviously, have been affected pretty badly. Much like the PS2 port, some of the glitches have been removed, but some are still in the game for some reason. Ruby Heart's teleporting and sprite glitches from the arcade version are gone, but Guile's Team Super glitch is still in this version, so this version is a bit inconsistent with the bug fixes. The developers behind this port, Backbone Entertainment, stated in a 2009 press release that the HD versions were made with the Dreamcast version's codebase as a point of reference, so it's a shame that there are unique quirks specific to these versions of the game. If you're looking at the HD ports from a purely casual or intermediate level of play, then it's a great way to experience Marvel 2, but there's a reason why the top players prefer to use the Dreamcast version to this very day.
Yep.
A good amount of people from all skill levels also like to net play the PS3 version using the RPCS3 emulator, so the HD port can be played for fun and even competitively.
And then that's it, right? What's it like? There's no other version. Oh, there's an iOS version? He's playing it on iPad.
The original release of Street Fighter 4 iOS back in 2009. I can't imagine two iPhones on early 2010s internet trying to play a match of Marvel 2 in sync without any technical hiccups, so perhaps it's for the best that this game lacks online play. Going back to Street Fighter 4 iOS for a moment, that game was specifically made for iOS and Android, whereas Marvel 2 is obviously a port of the Dreamcast version. So trying to get a Naomi game running on a smartphone must have been quite the challenge for Capcom's poor mobile games division back then. Even though this game
looks very good. Nah, it's terrible. Okay, on to the next video. We watched that one for a long time. On to the next video.
Video game rap battles! Player 1, Bowser! Player 2, Dr. Eggman!
So this basically copied epic rap battles of history and just does it with video game characters. Okay.
This be the king of the Coopers. Back by my army, your troopers. I trap with the princess, you try trapping critters, but we got the shells that'll shoot you. Right at the chopper that you just jacked for me. You face the monster, conquering galaxies, hide in your lab while I'm rocking the castle. Cause you lose the animals in every battle, like whoa. I'm a superstar saga. You're just trash from Sega, who lost a mascot contest to his own rival. What a failure, so I flame ya. I fight gory, lick my lips cause I like poultry. Squeeze my jaw and eat you raw, that's what I call an inside story. Lectured by Lizard Brain.
I don't know. Some people like epic rap battles from history and stuff. I've never watched them. Doesn't it just seem like really corny? I don't know. It just seems corny. Like, is it really? Oh, it's so hard. Yo, did you hear what Bowser said? He said he's gonna eat fucking Dr. Eggman. Dude, you're talking about two fucking imaginary video game characters fighting and eating each other. Like, what are you talking about? It's just corny to me, right? Cringy, corny. Some people really love it. Some people absolutely love the epic rap battles of history. And this is just a spin-off of that. But I don't get it. Like, I'm not going to laugh at anything in this video, right?
One thing that I must ask then, did you look back at all your games? Cause you lose to the mustache men. This little slow if he thinks that he's tough. To beat you all I have to do is just jump over you and into the lava you're dunked. I'd be more threatened rapping against Doug Bowser. Go back in that shell so you can hide, coward. Are you rapping in your final form? Your flow is dry, Bowser. I'm a mad genius, you're a buffoon. I'll turn this dragon to my dragoon. It's absurd, my flow is out of this world. As if I had just pissed on the moon. Maybe invent something to hype your rap flows. Battle with gadgets must spike, so just trash those. Claim that your genius is simply a match, though you couldn't craft a way to get it smashed, bro. Even robotic, whatever you call it, I'm gonna leave this status so splattered like pollen. Cause over the years, I got rough and tougher, but based
See? I don't have anything to say. It's just... And epic rap battles are old, correct? How old is this video? I'm just curious. 4 years ago. And the dude got 3.3 million views on it, right? It's just like... I don't know, man. I don't get it. And there's another one. They got 152 views 2 weeks ago. I just don't find it entertaining. Maybe other people do. And you know what? Again, I'm not here to crap on your parade if you like this, but it's just cringe. I don't get it. Thank you, Eva Cowboy fan, for becoming a submissions tier member. Now you'll be able to submit videos for next week when I put up the thread later today. It's not up yet. I'll put up the thread up tonight. Okay? All right. Let's go through one more video here for this part. What makes Riven different than other games? This is still in the... Yes, it is. I want to make sure that we didn't screw up. Yes, we still have this, and we have 4 more videos. Okay. For the Ultra submission. Cool. What makes Riven different from other games? And this is the new one that just came out that we played earlier this year. Sadly, I played it right before I got my new gaming PC. I really wish I had played it when I had my
I know
gaming
what sets
PC.
Riven apart. I know what sets Riven apart. It is the world building. It's everything in there has meaning.
Just seems like things are a lot more interconnected than a lot of other games and franchises might be.
You look at other games, especially the original one, and games at that time were blocky and clunky, and this one jumped through some leaps and bounds and made a world look utterly real and sound and feel real.
I mean, it's even set apart from Myst, right? Myst is this kind of solitary adventure where you're basically alone trying to figure out what's happening, and Riven picks up with this tension.
There's something about Riven that you feel kind of grounded in. Everything was meant to be there.
After 3.5 years of thinking about a thing, it really does become real in your head. And so the next step for that would be to actually be able to stand there and feel like you really were in that place.
We've never...
And that's when we really did create the island of Riven. All of those islands are real. We built them out in the Pacific. Now, that would be wild. This is all these years later, we're revealing this actually exists out there. You could go check out those islands in real life.
Never touched Riven since the original, and so it had sort of this sacred aura around it, and we want to be respectful of what people love about the original, but also push it into new territory, new generation of players.
So it was with a little bit of anxiety that we started considering it, because we felt like the tools had to be right for Riven. You know, the technology had to be able to do this in a way that felt worthy of the original, and it started feeling that way.
First off,
what I would say is, after having played the original Myst and then Riven, Myst is a fine puzzle game, but Riven feels like an interconnected world that's real. Like when you're going between the islands and you got to keep backtracking to do different puzzles when you get different information from each island and everything, it feels like it's uniquely, beautifully interconnected and special. It really does feel that way, as opposed to, I would say with Myst, it just feels like, okay, you're in the starter area, do some puzzles. Oh, you went to another area, do some puzzles. You go here, do some puzzles. But it doesn't feel like a naturally flowing world that was designed to be something you're going to be moving around, correct? So, in my opinion, I think that Riven is actually a much better game than Myst. Also, better plot, too. Yeah, so Ava Cowboy fan, don't worry. What's going to happen is every Sunday night, after I finish with all my content for the day, I post up a community thread on the channel here where you can post up your video. So you can't do it yet. The thread that's up there is from last week, so don't do it. New thread will be coming later tonight. After I finish my late stream over on my throwback channel, I post up all the new stuff. Sometimes I do a little bit earlier in the day, but you'll see it has the date and everything. It'll have next week's date and everything on it and say post up here, and then you'll post up your videos in there. You'll just check the community tab later today. Okay.
3D in general, I mean, it's just the first time that we're going to be now, you know, you can walk around the world, you can get around that area that you didn't see before, what's behind this thing, but then also moving it towards VR.
There's something about seeing Riven for the first time in VR that makes it feel real. I don't know how to describe it otherwise, because you get a sense of scale, things that you couldn't see before, you know, especially because it's only been flat. It hasn't even been, you know, on a flat screen 3D. You couldn't even get parallax. It has always just been flat images.
It was just this presence that you got that you're like, wow, okay, this is big.
So seeing it where you get visual clues of how distant the islands are.
Yeah, that's cool.
You just want to stand there and look at it. I don't feel like I want to go anywhere fast. I just I feel immersed.
Riven is one of those games that really requires you to stop and think and be in the moment.
I hope we're translating that into the 3D environment now as being as real as it can be nowadays too.
Any trepidation we feel is around the idea of not wanting to disappoint people, but I think people are going to find a lot to love and a lot to be surprised with.
And
you're going to find a lot to be disappointed in. No, it's good. I played it, and this was great. I didn't play it in VR, but I played it on my mini PC, and with the graphics kind of half running, it was still a great game. I really wish I had played it on my gaming PC, because I did run it on the gaming PC as a demo when I first got the gaming PC, and oh my god, the game looked great. Like shit, and I just beat it. But what can you do, right? Okay, that's good. So thank you guys for watching. When we come back, there will be the end of the Ultra member videos. And then for the second half of the show, we will do the submissions tier where it's random selected, okay? But thank you. Good stuff so far. Hope you're enjoying, and I will see you in the next part.